Okay, back to Pirkei Avos. It's been like a month, maybe. All right, so we're going to continue where we left off last time. Let's try to moderate our expectations here. It's been a bit of a week, and I can definitely promise you at least one idea and like a couple of solid half ideas. But we'll see if we can develop the other halves. We will definitely get something. Okay. So we are up to in one of the counts of Pirkei Avos, chapter 3, Mishnah 11 and 12, which are I put together because you'll see why. Okay, Rabbi Chanina. Oh, and here the normal version is very similar to the more accurate version, so we're just gonna do the normal one. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa Omer. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa says, Kol sheyiras cheto kodemis lochachmaso chachmaso miskayemes. Anyone want to translate that?
Anyone whose fear of his sin comes before his chochmah.
Comes before his chochmah.
His wisdom will endure.
Okay, good. His wisdom will endure. That's actually a good translation. Yeah. I will offer as other possibilities. Will endure, be established, be permanent. Okay. Miskayem is a difficult word. Okay. V'chosha chachmaso kodemes liras cheto in chachmaso miskayemes.
So anyone whose his chochmah comes before his fear of his sin, then his wisdom will not endure.
Yep, will not endure. Okay, etc. All right. Then we have and even though you're correct, yiras cheto, I think I don't know why, but my translation intuition is telling me that it just means his fear of sin. I don't know why it's not yiraso shel chet, so just whose fear of sin. So that'll be there. Okay, then we have hu haya omer. He would say, so same person. Kol shema'asav mirubin mechachmaso chachmaso miskayemes.
Should I continue?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Anyone whose actions are quantitatively more.
Yeah, right. It's a weird phrase, right? I struggled how to translate that, and I actually just cheated right now, and I looked at just a sitter that has it. They say exceeds, which I think is a nice way to say it, because it's kind of like it's quantitative, but it doesn't feel awkwardly quantitative.
Yeah.
His actions exceed his wisdom.
Yeah.
Yep.
And his wisdom will endure.
Will endure. Yep.
And I guess you didn't read the last part.
Yeah. Chachmaso miskayemes. V'chosha chachmaso merubim mimasav in chachmaso miskayemes.
Right. So then the opposite, I guess. Yep. Anyone whose
wisdom exceeds his Chosha chachmaso. Wait, I think I copied and pasted that part twice. Chosha masav merubim chachmaso chachmaso miskayemes chachmaso. Wait. No, it's not the same thing twice, is it? Did I just? Okay, no. Yeah. Anyone whose wisdom exceeds his actions, yeah, there we go. His actions, his wisdom will not endure. Okay, so very straightforward in terms of reading, right? The question is the questions we have to determine. Right? So what are the questions? I feel like there's at least 3 primary questions. Yeah, yeah. Maybe you don't have to ask primary ones, whatever. Yeah.
Right. What does fear of sin mean in this case? What does wisdom mean in this case?
Yes.
And what does it mean that a fear of sin comes before wisdom?
Okay, so let's go
with vice versa.
We'll do the definition questions first in terms of the 3 subjects. What are the definitions of Chochmah, yiras chet, and ma'asim in this context? I'm just gonna put them in one question. Okay, and then what does kodemes mean in this context? Okay, good. Alex?
You could possibly ask about how what's it called? Fear of sin would kind of face up against actions.
So are you asking what
Because-
is the difference between fear of sin and actions, or like what's the relationship between them?
Yeah, what's the relationship?
Yeah.
Rather?
Okay,
Better
yeah.
way to phrase it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna actually ask that in a different way. I don't know if this is the best way to ask it, but I'm gonna just put this out there. Okay, so why does Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa express this truth in these two clauses? Okay, comparing or I guess pitting Chochmah against yiras chet and Chochmah against ma'asim. Okay, why what like I guess what is the relationship between, I guess this is slightly more than your question, but I'm going to put your question here anyway, between yiras chet and ma'asim yeah. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Lauren?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a question, but I guess I keep thinking of like Rashis, Chochmah, Yiras Elokim. And like I don't know why, like I guess I'm wondering how Ma'asam
okay.
is different than Yiras Elokim than Yiras Chet. Like why have that second clause? Maybe it's probably following up, I guess, about what you just asked, but
Okay, so let me just get that straight here. So there's a pasuk that says, there's actually two similar pasukim. One is said by David Melech, and the other one said by Shlomo. So yours, you put the Rashis Chochmah Yiras Hashem. Is that the one?
yeah, I think it's like after Modani. I'm like,
Right.
that's what's in my head.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know where that's from.
So the beginning
exactly.
of Chochmah is Yiras Hashem, and then Shlomo Melech says Yiras Hashem Rashis Da'as. Fear of Hashem is the beginning of knowledge. Okay, so that definitely is true. So what's the say the question again? I just wanted to make sure I got the right quote.
I guess maybe like why have the second phrase like Masim? Like I guess it's kind of what's the relationship between Yiras Chet and Masim, or what's the difference, I guess? Like what's Masim adding that Yiras Elokim, if Yiras Elokim is the most important, then why do you need to have also about Masim kind of?
All right, yeah. So
might not be a separate question.
Yeah, why do we need like both? Why do we need both clauses? Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, Tamar?
This isn't a super well formulated question, but it just seems a little bit weird. Like it sounds like since it's telling you about whether or not your Chochmah is gonna miskayim, right? Like if your Chochmah is gonna endure, then it sounds like you care about Chochmah, but then it's telling you to put something else first. I also don't know if chronemis means like chronologically or prioritized, but like yeah, like what's the strategy?
So let's do it this way, and I hope this encompasses your question, which is why frame everything, why measure everything in terms of the consideration of making your Chochmah endure. Okay, in terms of the other part of your question, that like, clearly we're talking to someone who cares about Chochmah enduring, and yet it's telling him to put something else first. I think that's probably like what the Chiddush is, but the question is like, why the focus on the Chochmah enduring? Like, it almost makes it sound like Yiras Chet is like just a means to an end, which I don't know if that's like, if that's necessarily true. Yeah, Ayala?
So what is the like advice, or like what is it saying here? Like how can you just make your Yiras
okay.
like
how does one do this on a practical level, right? You don't just like scrunch up your face and go fear, yeah. Yeah, Ayala?
Also, I don't think we asked what does miskayemes mean.
Right, correct.
Like I guess I would think two possible ways are like that way you have it in your life, or I was thinking like after your life. I don't know if
okay, that's interesting. Okay, so what does miskayemes mean in this context? Okay, and I'm going to actually just ask that as like as opposed to I guess let's put it this way, what do miskayemis and Ano, is it Ano? Yeah, whatever. Ana miskayemis mean in this context, right? In other words, like, is it like, I mean, if you remember from January that the I think the last one we did had to do with like forgetting your chochmah, so the fact that it uses a different phrase seems to not be, doesn't mean that you're going to forget it. So in what sense does it not last? And also like how long would it last if you ignore this, right? Like and how would it how would it not endure, right? Yeah. Tamar.
Again, kind of a funny question, but the especially with the second half with the masav merubin mechach maso.
Yeah.
Like if the person just has less chochmah, because someone with like less chochmah have this sort of like all things being equal, but he has less chochmah, that's going to be some way this is going to work, like.
Okay, so are you asking about the fact that it seems to only be concerned with the amount of ma'asim relative to chochmah, but not how
Yeah, it's like
much?
comparative.
Yeah, okay, right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, all right, that's a good question. All right, so what do we make of the fact that it's only that the Mishnah only seems concerned with the comparative relationship between Chochmah and Ma'asim rather than the objective measure of each. Okay, that's good. Oh, we didn't ask, I think we noted this when we were translating, which is what does it mean for your ma'asim to be merubin mechach masa, right? So like I understand ma'asim is subject to quantity, but like comparing, I don't know, like if I said like, anyone who has more, dollars than intelligence, like you can count dollars, but like you can't count intelligence. And how do you like compare the two? It's like, it's like apples and courage, you can't compare the two. All right. Okay. I guess we'll ask what has become our standard question, which is who is the audience of this Mishnah? To what extent does this apply to the non-chassid, the non-chassid? Let's just say non-chassid. Okay. All right. So I feel like that's probably it. We can add more if need be. But let's do this. I'm going to copy this and put this in the chat like I usually do. Oopsies, I just erased it. Copy, put this in the chat so we can have all the questions up there. Okay. All righty. So let's just take our. You have another question, Lauren, or you have an idea?
Yeah, I don't know if this is really a good question on this Mishnah or not, but I'm wondering why it says Yirah Chet and not Yirah Hashem.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so yeah, you're right. I also don't know. I had the same question when I was preparing this. I don't know if this is a good question, it's a good question. I don't know if it's a question that is proper to ask on this Mishnah, but we'll ask it anyway. Why Yiras Chet as opposed to, there's two other terms that are frequently used, right? One is Yiras Hashem, and what's the other?
Yirat Shamayim.
Yeah, Yiras Shamayim. Yeah. I used to have a theory for maybe I still do have a theory for like what the relationship is between those three terms. Plain pshat is they're interchangeable, but I would, and other plain pshat is that maybe kind of what Alex was intuiting, that that it's using Yiras Chet kind of like as an a contrast to masim. Like chait is like bad actions, and masim here are obviously good actions. So maybe that's why it's using it. But I think it's a good question to ask anyway, but not one that we can necessarily demand of the Mishnah. We'll see. Okay, so let's take a minute to think, and then we will try to come up with this answers on our own, and then we'll look at Mefarshim, as we are wont to do. I'm going to add another question here, just to clarify. What type of Chochmah? Okay, like, I guess you could ask this about all three of them, but I feel like Chochmah is the most general term here. Like, are we talking Chochmah of the Torah? Are we talking about like just knowledge of Torah? Or is this expand to like, I don't know, knowledge of the world? It's included in what's the definition, but I would ask anyway. Okay, anyone have anything? You don't have to answer all of them, but anyone have any half-baked ideas? Yeah, Tamar.
This is like a quarter-baked idea.
Okay, that's fine. Just slightly singed.
Yeah, it's like an association, I guess.
Okay, that's fine.
Something, but the thing that this sort of reminds me of is the general idea of like having intellectual knowledge that's not grounded in how you live your life.
Okay.
And that's something that's lacking. Okay,
good. So I will flag that with the Rביnu Yona flag, because that's the approach Rביnu Yona is going to take. Okay, and we can develop that. I mean, we could develop on our own also, but yeah, Ayala.
Okay, I don't also not really fully baked, but something similar. Maybe
you guys can have raw ideas. Like it's okay. It's like like cookie dough sometimes okay to eat.
Okay, this is not baked at all then.
Okay.
But maybe I was thinking that like, oh yeah, I guess like Chochmah in it of itself is like when your energy is directed to that, like I guess it's not like a guard for anything. Like Chochmah is great to be involved in it, but it's not like gonna stop you or keep you involved in it. Like you have to have other stuff in order to like stay involved in Chochmah.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna flag that with the Rambam flag. Okay, that's Rambam's approach is the only like solid idea I have. And the other ones are I'm not confident in, but we're gonna go through them anyway. Our goal, by the way, is there's three approaches I want to go over: Rambam, Rביnu Yona, and Sforno. Okay. So yeah, just to sneak peek. Okay, Lauren.
Yeah, I think this is like following up on Ayala's, but I guess one thing that I was thinking about when I first read the Mishnah is just the idea that like you need to have fear of God before like achieving Chochmah. Like you need to have recognized like your own boundaries and your own limits in terms of your intellect, and also kind of like how like Shlomo HaMelech, he thought he understood all the reasons of the mitzvahs, and then that led him to sin because he kind of presupposed that I won't come to that. So I feel like that's kind of like maybe this is maybe similar to that idea.
So what's interesting is you're making me realize something that is related to what you asked before. So the pasuk you quoted before, Yiras Hashem Reishis Chochmah, or Reishis Chochmah Yiras Hashem. So that seems to be saying that you need Yiras Hashem before you get any Chochmah. What's interesting here is you can acquire Chochmah, it's just that it won't endure. So I'm not saying that to like disprove your idea or anything like that, but it does seem to be that you can acquire Chochmah. It's just that somehow it won't be miskayemes, whatever that means.
Right. I mean, it could be a separate point, I guess. Like maybe that's another point.
Yeah. But I guess you are well. See, and then the other thing, your Shlomo example seems to be both relevant and difficult, right? Because on the one hand, we do say that Shlomo was the Chacham Mikol Adam, that he was one of the greatest Chachamim. Yet, as you point out, like his Chochmah failed him. So do we call that? I mean, do we say Shlomo's Chochmah persisted, endured, or not? Or is it a thing where, like, is this talking, I guess, actually, I'm going to add this to the questions here. Is this like a phenomenon? I don't know. This is not going to be a clear question. A phenomenon about all the person's Chochmah, or can this be localized / compartmentalized? So what I mean is, like, let's say with Shlomo HaMelech, like he married too many wives, right? So could you say that, yeah, in all the other areas of Mishlei and in his Malchus and in his judgment, then his Chochmah was miskayemes because he did have Yiras Chet before him, but then in this one area, then he did not put Yiras Chet first, and therefore, like, his Chochmah wasn't miskayem there? Or are we saying, like, about your whole relationship to Chochmah is either going to be miskayemes or not,
Right, but I feel like, well, with Shlomo, it's just interesting because those wives then led to the bringing in Avodah Zarah into the land, and then that led to destruction of the Beis Hamikdash ultimately. So it's kind of like, I mean, it's a different topic, but yeah.
Right. I mean, certainly there are other. Let's put it this way: there are going to be other consequences for not having Yiras Chet, right? But this Mishnah seems to only be talking about the consequences in terms of your Chochmah being miskayemes or not.
Right.
Yeah. And that could be what it's talking about in the example you mentioned, but we have to keep our eye on that just on that factor. Okay, so let's go into the Rambam and yeah, Ayala.
Just to flesh out the question more.
Sure.
What does, like, I guess we said, like, what does it mean that you're kodemet? But, like, is it in terms of, like, you're thinking about it more? Is it like if there's a decision and you have to choose between Chochmah or Yiras Chet, like,
okay,
what does it mean exactly?
Okay, how does this kadmus play itself out in decision making? Okay, and we're going to see Rambam and Rביnu to take two different approaches for this. Okay, all right, so let's do Rambam. And now, fortunately, one of my favorite things in learning Rishonim is when you have a Rishon who gives over an idea, and then a later Rishon who summarizes that same idea in his own words. Okay, so here we have Rambam, and then Rביnu Yona actually just says over the Rambam's own idea. I actually quoted the Rביnu Yona out of order. Really, the Rביnu Yona says it here as a davar acher, but since we're going to go with Rambam first, I'm going to put it first. Okay, so we're going to hear this idea twice. You know what? I'm in such conflict about, like, whether to type out the translations or not, because it's like additional slowing down. I'm going to do it this time because I'm, like, in the mood to do it. So, and that way we can have it on the screen. Okay, so Rambam. Here we go. Okay, so I'm not going to type the translation in the Mishnah part. So anyone whose fear of sin precedes his Chochmah will persist. Okay, davar zeh muskam gam etel filosofim. This principle is agreed upon also by the philosophers. Okay, now I tried to look for which philosophers he's talking about. My guess is Aristotle, but I don't know enough my way around the Nicomachean ethics to figure out where he says this. Okay, ki hahergel b'midos hanalos, that habituating yourself in good midos, im kadmu l'chachma, if that comes before wisdom, achi helo b'kach tchuna chazaka, to the point where you have a strong disposition, okay, personality disposition, v'lamar chachma achrechein, and you learn wisdom afterwards, tizarzehu al osan hatovos. The wisdom will motivate you towards those same goods. Harizeh, then this will mosif kesher b'chachma, will increase your attachment to Chochmah, the ahava ba, and love of it, ulehitus lahosif ba, and a yearning to increase it. Okay, why? Here's the key idea: kiven shehi me'orarto lama shahaya ragil, because the Chochmah is motivating you towards that to which you are already accustomed. Okay. Aval im kadmu tchunos raos. But if you start off with bad midos, okay, v'lamad achrechein, and then learn afterwards, v'na'asis chachmaso muna'ato mitavosav shuragi lahem, and your chochmah, your wisdom, withholds you from your desires. Your chochmah becomes that which withholds you from your desires that that you are habituated in. Tichbat alav, the wisdom will weigh heavily upon you, v'azvena, and you will abandon it. Okay, so that's the Rambam's idea. And if we want to see it in literal, in other words, let's look at Rבינו Yona's summary of the Rambam. Davar acher. Okay, so this is Rבינו Yona quoting Rambam. So he says, "Bisman shiur escheto shel adam kodemes l'chachmaso." When a person's fear of sin precedes his wisdom, nimtza kishulamid. Consequently, oh, that was a horrible spelling. Consequently, kishulamad, when he learns, mazhirto uma'asharto lelech b'derech shulfurgo lelechas ba mikamayan. His chochmah, his wisdom, will admonish him and praise him to follow the path that he has been accustomed to for many days, namely to be sin-fearing. V'libo mosif ba'ava, and his heart will increase in love. Umis'ava lahosif mimena, and he will desire to increase chochmah. Lefi shihi ma'asharto, because it motivates him l'mashur bahem, towards that which he is accustomed to. Aval bizman shechachmas shel adam kodemes li'yircheto, but when a person's wisdom precedes his fear of sin, nimtzeis hachachma, then the chochmah mona'ato me'averos shehurgo behem will attempt, okay, to prevent him from doing transgressions which he has been accustomed to. The sofo leva'id ba, and he will ultimately rebel against it, lefi shedoma elav kamasoi, because it will be a burden to him. Okay, same idea, different words. Okay, so I'm just going to juxtapose the English here so we can see it on the screen. Okay, so what is the in your own words, now that we've seen Yona's words, in your own words, what's the main idea of the Rambam here? I don't think it's a new idea, but I think it's someone that we need to think about, especially on a practical level. Or let me give you an inroad. In psychology, what do we call this phenomenon that the Mishnah is revolving around? I don't know if that's easier or harder. Yeah, Ayala?
I feel like it's talking about like a cognitive dissonance, exactly. That like your actions have to be in line with your knowledge. So if your actions are different than your knowledge, you're going to reject the knowledge because your actions are more habitual.
Yep. Okay. So we've talked about this a lot. Those who were in Shalhevet for the last like 6 years remember maybe when I when I gave the thing about trying to live a Torah life on a college campus, when you're going to face a lot of like temptations of different non-Torah lifestyles and activities, then I mentioned that like one of the purposes of halacha is that one of the benefits of halacha is that it keeps your actions locked into place, and the reason why that's important is because if there's a war between your actions/habits and your chochmah, your actions and habits will always win out. Okay, that's just we are. It's true. We are a hybrid creature of a tzelem elokim and a nefesh chaya, like a rational animal. But the animal is always going to be more powerful than the rational in terms of a default. And that's the I've also talked about in when we talk about habits, the mashal of the rider on the elephant that's on the path. That there's really 3 ways to change your habits. there's three categories of strategies. There's rider-based strategies, elephant-based strategies, and path-based strategies. Rider-based strategies, the rider in the muscle is the intellect. And you can do certain things to, let's say, like convince yourself, do a cost benefit analysis, and like think about like the benefits of doing this new activity and like the consequences of doing the harmful activity, and that can affect you, but the effect is the weakest of the three. Then there's elephant-based strategies where you're actually like training the animal on its own terms and like luring it with not carrots, peanuts. I guess that's what the stereotypical elephants eat, and its punishments. And then and that's more effective. Than the most effective is changing the path, and that's like changing your environment and your circumstances. So this is really saying that like if you try to if you don't train the elephant, then it's going to like throw off the rider, but if you have a well-trained elephant, then your rider will be able to to be where it needs to be. Yeah. So on a practical level, though, I mean, I guess, are there any, certain mishnayos that we've done in this Pirkei Avos here, the real work lies in understanding the ideas. In other mishnayos, it's much more like Mishlei, where the ideas are simple, but like to implement it is the hard thing. So I guess, does anyone have any practical questions here that could motivate us to delve deeper? Yeah, Yael?
So it sounds like you should try to change your habits first, but how do you do that if you're not using the intellect?
Yeah. So this is one of the problems, which is clearly it's not like he's saying that you do a full character development thing first without any chochmah, and then only then do you go into chochmah, right? But now the question, and you need certain chochmah in order to do your character development. So the question is like, either the way I'll ask it, which is like, what character development strategies are available that are not dependent on a great amount of chochmah, or like how do you balance your time involvement, your energy investment? Okay, that's one question. We'll get all the questions on the table and then we'll answer them. So Shira?
That was my question, but also then like following up on that,
sure.
Does that is that to discount like middos that you've acquired or wisdom that you've acquired before the middos, but like it's kind of a relationship between each other of like developing both at once,
right? Okay, yeah. So that's gonna be another thing in terms of my question of the time span. Like, what about all that chochmah you're developing that you've developed before you got the middos in general, or the middos in that area, and then like what about the stuff that you're working on at the same time? Like, is that like valueless? Like what do we make of that?
Right. And also like, is that to say that you would have to kind of like overhaul your middos after acquiring new knowledge, and then like if it's looking the same, then like
so you're beginning to sense the how practically messy this is, which is the difficulty. Yeah. Okay, good. Tamar?
I think same line of questioning. In this reading, the word kodemis, I guess.
Yes.
So it kind of sounds like it means chronologically first, but we're seeing all the problems with that. So what that means. Yeah. So do we think it means chronologically first?
Yes, and in fact, I'm going to just sneak peek show you the Rabbeinu Yona. Okay, so again, this is Rabbeinu Yona explaining the Rambam. In the actual Rabbeinu Yona, he says, in contrast, Inyan hahishtadlus nemar hadavar hazeh, that this is not being said chronologically, it's being said in terms of your striving, where you put your energy. Klomar, and this brackets is the footnote guy in the Torah Chaim I have. Ha-chachma hamuskeres bereisha de mishnasenu. The chachma that's mentioned in the beginning of our Mishnah, ena ha-chachma atzma, is not talking about chachma itself. Ella ha-hishtadlus l'chachma. It's talking about striving for chachma. Kol shiur chadol kodemus lihishtadluso l'chachma. Anyone whose fear of sin takes priority over his striving for chachma. So in other words, the Rambam is talking chronologically. Rabbeinu Yona, which we haven't read yet, is going to be talking about like priority wise. So you're a good call. And then then the question is, how does that work out? Yeah, Ayala?
Also, what are the definitions of, or what is the definition of chochmah in this case?
Yes. Okay, good. Right. So the question is what type of chochmah does it sound like he's talking about? Or not? Does it sound like he's not talking about? Either way.
I mean, I was thinking like Mishlei Chochmah, but I think he's not talking about that, because I would think that would fall more into like the actions.
Okay. Yeah, Tamar?
Yeah, it kind of almost sounds like he could be talking about knowledge of halacha to me.
Okay, so I think let's hone in on it. I think clearly he's talking about chochmah that pertains to action, because he's talking about the chochmah motivating you to that which you are already doing, or preventing you from that which you're doing. So it sounds like he's not talking about chochmah, which is purely theoretical. So let's say like you can, I mean, Tamara, you can vouch for this, okay, because you know more people like this than we do. You can't, or I guess I'll also, maybe, you can become a mathematician without having good middos, okay? And it's not like your mathematical knowledge is going to be like, you know, causing you to change your lifestyle in terms of your personality middos, you know? So I don't think we're talking about theoretical chochmah here. We're either talking about chochmah in terms of halacha, which dictates your actions, like Rבינו Yona, you know, classic Rבינו Yona. Rבינו Yona always sounds more religious than the Rambam does. Rבינו Yona loves talking about mitzvos and averos. You know, Rambam talks about character perfection, which is a much more like Aristotelian thing. You know, so we're either talking about like halachos or just midah development. I mean, it could be both also. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Ayala.
Can it be? I was thinking like knowledge of Torah. Because like if you learn Torah, that would like have practical implications in your life.
Okay, so the question now, another difficulty is like this. Okay, is I understand how if I am in the habit of speaking lashon hara and I learn about lashon hara, then the chochmah is going to create cognitive dissonance with my actions. Okay, so that makes sense to me. Okay, similarly, if I am, let's say, you know, a jealous person, and I'm learning about why jealousy is a bad midah, then that's going to go against it. But here's another question. Let's say I am like, you know, learning, let's say I have a habit of violating halacha and I'm learning about God, okay, just like metaphysics or philosophy about God. So even though that doesn't directly pertain to my actions, it does have ramifications in my actions, because the more knowledge I get about God, the more real God is going to come to my mind. And the fact that God commanded us in halacha is going to eventually like trickle into my halacha observance, you know? And so there could be like things that are, well, let's say like even math, let's say like, I mean, theoretically, maybe even in math, like in math, you know, you are using your mind and you are, you know, you're trying to have theories that are rational and not irrational. So it's possible that like if you are training yourself to be consistently rational in math and you are consistently irrational in some of your personal decisions, there's going to be cognitive dissonance just from the fact that you're like behaving rationally in this area and irrationally in that area. So it could be that this is going to affect everything. Maybe this is messier than I thought. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that is a good question. Yeah, Shira?
That just gave me an idea though, that maybe about like what miskayama means is that like knowledge that
I totally forgot about that question, by the way. I'm glad you reminded me of that. Yeah.
Like maybe the things that you wouldn't necessarily think would directly correlate, like math, will only have the ability to relate to your mido and like personality traits once you work on developing that, because you'll be aware of that.
Yeah. So it's like miskayim. I think it's endure in the sense that you can't really say that the ideas will have a you know, okay, I don't know if I can succeed in this imagery here, but it's like, yeah, you want to say something or no?
Yeah.
Like there's always, if you don't have good middos, there's always a threat that something you learn is going to contradict your middos, and then what you learn will not find like a permanent lodging in yourself. You know, like it won't find a home that has like a permanence in who you are. But if you set up your middos in a way that is receptive to the chochmah, or that can be you know, that lends itself to like accepting the chochmah without cognitive dissonance, then like it can like have a permanent lodging. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yael?
I think I'm struggling a bit with what like what the purpose would be if you already have good middos. Like I guess the Chochmah itself would be the goal, but I was thinking like, is it possible that your chait can mean kind of like self-awareness or something along those lines, such that if you had that before learning, you'd be able to apply what you learned because you're able to reflect on yourself, and not if you didn't. It seems like a more practical, like you'd be able to apply the Chochmah a lot more than if you already had the good mido.
Okay, so I think that's a good interpretation of the Mishnah. I don't sense that that's what the Rambam is saying, or Rabbeinu Yona, because they seem to be talking about resistance and like whatever the opposite of resistance is. They seem to be talking about like is your Chochmah going to be propelling you to engage in your habits more or less,
So are they valuing the wisdom in itself more, I guess, than what I was saying?
I think so. I think they are, and I think that's also why the Rambam emphasized, actually both of them emphasize that this is going to increase your attachment to Chochmah and your love of it and your desire to increase it. So like it does seem like we're talking to an audience that is already interested in Chochmah, and they just want as much Chochmah as they can and as great a relationship with Chochmah as they can. But the mistake they're making is they think that they could pursue it without working on their middos. And Rambam is saying, no, you're gonna eventually hit a brick wall. But if you work on your middos, you're clearing the path of all these obstacles, and then you're gonna the more attached you get to Chochmah, then the more you're gonna go after it, and the less obstacles you're gonna get, and it's gonna be like a virtuous cycle, not based on self-knowledge, although again, I think that is a good idea, but I just don't think that that's the way that the Rambam and the Yona are taking it. Okay, so we have some unanswered questions, and I still, the first question that was asked, I guess the first two questions that were asked, about like, how much Chochmah do you need in order to do this? And what should the balance be? I feel like those questions kind of point to the need to like design a personal curriculum for yourself. And I feel like that's a little bit beyond the scope of tonight, but just to give a few pointers here is that just to practical applications based on like my own experience is there are a lot of ways you could work on your middos without Chochmah or without much Chochmah. Okay. For example, you have atomic habits, right? And tiny habits, right? Those are not Chochmah-based strategies in the sense that you're not really like pursuing theoretical knowledge. You're using like almost like life hacks, or there's the Rambam's method in Hilchos Deos where you do actions that correspond to the midah that you want to cultivate. Or if you have a bad midah, you do actions that correspond to the opposite midah until you can get to the middle path. Or, there are, halacha itself, you obviously need to learn the actual what the law is, but you don't need to delve into an understanding of it. So much of the halacha, especially in like Hilchos Deos, if you just follow it, that's going to shape your middos in general. Like if you just, follow the halachos of lashon hara, or you follow the halachos of tzedakah, or you follow the halachos of kibud av v'im, or lo sisna asechicha b'levavecha, or like lo sachmod. These halachos are just through behaving in accordance with them is going to change your middos. So there's a lot you can accomplish without actually doing it through Chochmah. And if you are in the position of being a parent or a teacher, especially a teacher of young children, then there's a lot of, this is the Torah Simacha that like, a lot of informal education that is instilled at an early age, usually by the mother, of like good middos that are inculcated not through formal education, So I think there is a lot you can do with Yiras Chait, and you just need to know that that's a focus. So I think that like is a partial answer to our question about like how much can you, again, yeah, you need a mind, like you can't do it without a mind, but these are not Chochmah-based strategies. These are action or habit-based strategies or mitzvah-based strategies. And there's a lot you can do. Again, with tzedakah, like tzedakah is a great example. Like, if let's say you have one person who says, okay, I'm going to study the topic of generosity and I'm going to learn the philosophy behind generosity and I'm going to like lead with a Chochmah. So what's going to happen is he's going to be stingy. He's going to be like preoccupied with his own money, and there's going to be cognitive dissonance, and he's going to stop learning those halachos. But if you just force yourself to give tzedakah, then you are going to develop compassion and detachment from your money and a sense of justice and empathy and all this other stuff, so that when you learn about that area, then there will not be nothing to oppose your chochmah. So I think there's a lot you could do with action without a tremendous chochmah. I'll pause there for questions if there's any questions on that.
So what does like mitzkayemes mean? Does that mean like that you'll maintain your good character traits? You'll be
no. So it sounds
mitzvos?
like the Rביnu Yona and the Rambam are saying that you will maintain your drive for chochmah in that area. And I do think that it is specifically true with that area, but it's also the point that Ayala made is true, that this might, there are areas where this could bleed into your entire relationship with chochmah in general, where like a guy thinks let's say you have a person who thinks that they're really into learning Torah, but like they're doing a bunch of averos, and they really do genuinely enjoy learning Torah, but that cognitive dissonance is going to get to a point where their avera lifestyle is going to win out, and they're just going to stop learning. So you are running like a risk about jeopardizing your entire attachment to chochmah there.
Okay, so it's saying like your relationship to chochmah will endure, I guess.
Yeah,
your relationship
exactly.
to Torah.
Yeah, your relationship with chochmah will endure. I think that's the way to put it. And again, I think primarily in the local, this is an area by area thing, but there is a risk that you could jeopardize the entire relationship to chochmah. Yeah, Tamar?
Would you say it's the same idea or a different idea to have the idea of like you're doing, let's say, a mitzvah, and let's say it's like tzedakah or something, where you could maybe actually get some sort of truer sense of the world from doing it.
Yeah.
That then you learn an idea, and the idea is clearer to you, or it sticks better. Is that this, or is that something else? That's like maybe the positive side.
Good question. See, hold on. I believe, let me just check something here. Actually, I'm going to check it from my Toras Chaim. 311. Did I call it 313? No, I did not. Hold on. Avos 311. I want to say that maybe the Meiri said something like that. I don't know why I didn't include the Meiri in this. Let's see here. No, Meiri's okay. I do want to go over the Meiri, but it's a different idea, I think. No. What you're saying is a true idea, but I don't think that that's what they're saying. I think that if it were what they were saying, they wouldn't put it just in terms of increasing your attachment to it. I think they would actually talk about how like you could be blind to certain ideas if you don't work on the mitos.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Shiur?
I feel like you reminded me also with that last point of like why it's important to just start doing actions if you don't have that feeling of like wanting to do it or understanding why.
Yeah. And that reminds me of this is one of the explanations of the mechanism of mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, that like, but it's almost explained in the reverse way, that if you try to go for the lishma where you're attached to it just for the idea, you're just not going to continue learning about it because your actions go against it. But if you remove that impediment by habituating yourself to do it, then like your learning will continue unopposed, and you'll increase your attachment to it. Okay, I know there's a lot of questions we haven't answered here yet, but let's put this aside and move on to the Rbiinu Yona in the interest of time. And I'm not going to type the translation of this one because it's too long. Okay, so he says like this, and he's going to say a couple ideas here. Okay, and this is, again, I'm sorry I'm not as prepared as I usually am, but we're just gonna learn whatever we learn here. Okay. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa says blah 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 blah. Okay, so we read that already, that we're talking about prioritizing. Someone who strives to know Chochmah in order to guard his soul from sin, and then he becomes wise. then his Chochmah will remain in his hand, will endure in his hand. V'nimtza porish min haveros v'oseh mitzvos kasher lamad v'hiskil. And then he will refrain from averos and do mitzvos as he learned and comprehended. Okay, but anyone whose Chochmah precedes his yiras chet, his Chochmah will not endure. Lo hishtadel mitchila l'das Chochmah kedei l'kaima. He does not learn Chochmah first in order to fulfill it. Im lahavi and lahaskil, but only to understand and to comprehend. Lo tiskaim biyado. It will not last in his hand. Meaning, if you plug in the thing from before, he will not fulfill it in action. And then he just says vadin nosein, and the verdict is set. Okay, meaning that I think this is a reality. Okay, so here he's talking. According to this, he's talking about a person who is only interested in Chochmah for theoretical purposes, but not in order to fulfill it. And he's saying that that Chochmah will not be realized in his action. Actually, it's funny. I'm not sure if that's what he's saying. Hold on. He says, if you learn Chochmah in order to fulfill it, so then your Chochmah will endure, and consequently you will separate from averos and do mitzvos in accordance with what you learned. It sounds like he's trying to say that that's what it means that your Chochmah endures, is that it is, or maybe he's not even learning it as endure. Miskaimes biyado will be fulfilled, meaning it'll express itself in action. And if you only learn in order to understand things on a theoretical level, then it will not express itself in action. Yeah. I actually want to pair that with the Meiri because I think it is similar. Okay, so the Meiri says, I like the way the Meiri expresses it. He says, Yiduahu shema'alos hamidos sheminias hachatayim nimshachim mehem shleimus rishon. Says it's known that the perfection of midos, from which you refraining from sin comes. In other words, when you perfect your midos, then that's what allows you to refrain from sin. Shleimus rishon, that is a first perfection. Okay, that's like a base level of perfection. V'hu shvil, and it is a path. Did I miss a line? Shvil. Oh, l'shleimus hanefesh. It is a path to perfection of the soul. Okay, well, that's the ultimate perfection. Uver brisa karu yiras chet kli umanos. Here's the mashal I like. In the brisa, it calls fear of sin a craftsman's tools. Amrusham, they said in the Gemara, Shalu l'Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, Chacham v'yarei chet mahu. What is the status of someone who's wise and sin-fearing? Amr lehem, he said to them, Uman ukle umanos biado. So he's a craftsman and he has his tools in the hand. Okay, but Chacham ve'ino yarei chet, if he's a Chacham and he's not sin-fearing, Uman, so he's a craftsman, ve'in kli umanos biado, he doesn't have his tools. Yarei chet ve'ino Chacham, if he's sin-fearing and he's not a Chacham, kli umanos biado ve'ino Uman, then he has his tools, but he's not a craftsman. Okay, so and then he goes on. He says, anyone who is entrenched in fear from the beginning, and he is rooted in good actions, and refrains from doing all bad things, his Chochmah will persist because it's entrenched in his hands. But anyone who is not strongly rooted in yira, then his Chochmah will not persist. Because without a foundation, you can't have a building. And then he says, then it moves on to mitzvos aseh, and that's how he interprets the second Mishnah. B'mitzvos umarbe b'asiyasam yoser min hamashur lo mitzad chochmaso, meaning he's careful in mitzvos and he does more of them than his chochmah dictates. Chochmaso is kayemes, then his chochmah will last. Shachachma tzricha lamasim v'tischaber etzlo ma'od. Chochmah requires actions and will be joined to him exceedingly. Okay, so I don't know if it's the same as the Rביno Yona, but they both seem to be saying this idea that, like, if let's use the craftsman analogy. If you have a guy who's like a carpenter, but he doesn't have any tools, so what good does his carpentry do? So if you have the Chochmah, but your midos don't obey, and therefore you don't act in your Chochmah, so then what good is the Chochmah? Whereas if you do have your Chochmah and your yiras chet, so then it's going to, the Chochmah will reach its fruition. See, something's missing here. Anyone else bothered by something? Maybe help me. Like I see the truth in what he's saying. Something is nagging in my head. Yeah, Ayala?
I mean, I think I don't really fully understand, like, in what sense the Chochmah is not fully realized without the actions. Like, what is I don't know, maybe this comes down to, like, what is the purpose of a Chochmah? And,
yeah,
like,
right. I'm thinking the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, one thing we have going for us that's easier is Rabbeinu Yona is most definitely talking about halacha, right? Like he's clearly not talking about math, right? So the point of the Chochmah is to live it, right? So see, I think the thing that's bothering me is the person who he's describing here, that he's not striving to know Chochmah in order to fulfill it, but only in order to understand it. It sounds like that person's not going to care if his Chochmah is not fulfilled in action. In other words, the argument that the Rambam made, Rambam says, "Oh, hey guy, you like Chochmah? Well, if you want to keep up with Chochmah, you have to make sure your middos go along with it." So he's talking to someone who wants Chochmah. Here, Rabbeinu Yona, if he's talking to someone who only wants to understand, then they're not really going to care if they don't fulfill it in action. Like I might have told this story before, but one of the rabbis who brought our family to Judaism, Rabbi Lapin, grew up in South Africa, and he said that one day on Shabbos, then his dad took him on a walk to this house, and on the house was this porch where there were these old Jewish men learning Gemara on Shabbos and smoking cigarettes, and so they were just doing it for like the intellectual involvement. And Rabbi Lapin's dad, I don't remember the punchline. He said something like that is not the type of Torah that we learn, like the Torah that we learn is Torah that we learn in order to, because we hold that it's real and that this is what is the good life. And if you're sitting there like learning about Masechah Shabbos and like violating Shabbos, so then you're just doing it for like intellectual stimulation, that's not like the Torah that we value. So like that sounds like the type of guy that this the Rabbeinu Yona is describing here. But like that guy's gonna say, I don't care if this is fulfilled in action. So like that's what's bothering me. Yeah, Shira?
I haven't come to the shiur in a while, so can you remind me, isn't Pirkei Avos like for the higher level of?
Okay,
I guess it bothers me that like this is like seen
okay,
at the base.
That's another good question. So you're entirely correct. Pirkei Avos, the way we've been learning it is it's mainly, so we did tweak one thing since the last time that we learned Pirkei Avos probably, is that that I used to hold that it was only for like the higher level people, but we've seen that like it's primarily directed towards the higher level people, but there are still applications for people on a lower level. But I think what's bothering you though is this does sound like it's not aimed at people who are like,
it seems much more like,
yeah, exactly, yeah, that also bothers me. Now this could be because maybe Rabbeinu Yona doesn't hold by that premise, but like it is a little bothersome. Yeah, Lauren?
Could it be that it's like warning the person that's and that's involved in Chochmah and cares about keeping the Torah, like don't make your Chochmah removed from like your actions or the practical, like maybe like always kind of trying to relate it to be like, I guess like if it, I don't know, maybe it's like kind of say like, I guess I feel like it could be like a slippery slope if you make it purely intellectual and then you forget about the action. Like
so
helpful type, or I don't know.
That's an opening. So even though the example I gave with Rabbi Lapin, the porch men, we'll call them, that's one case, but maybe that's not what this is talking about. Maybe this is talking about the tendency of the people who are overly attached to the intellectual dimension of Torah and can get totally lost in that being the only reason why they learn, to the point where they neglect working on their middos. It's warning them that like, so those people, in other words, those people, if you ask them, hey, do you think that your Chochmah should be fulfilled in action? They'll say, of course it should be, But then you ask them, well, then why is it that you are not working on your middos? Like I'll give you an example of this, and I'm gonna full disclaimer here. I'm kind of like horrified by how judgmental I am on this topic. but it really stood out in my mind. And like, I hope God doesn't judge me the way I'm judging this individual, but I'm going to use it for like illustration purposes because I think it illustrates this. So one time when I was in yeshiva, you know, if you've ever like learned with me around Yom and Orion, like we talk about tshuva a lot, you know, we talk about like shofar, and like, I don't know about you, but like, I really try to build up to the Tkiya shofar in terms of like getting the ideas and like having the right kavana and like thinking about myself and like the wake up call and all that stuff. So I was in yeshiva and there was a person seated like near me who for the entire davening had a Reb Chaim on Bava Kama or something like that in front of him. He was like learning like, you know, in-depth halacha about Bava Kama. Okay. And like, I was like, okay, fine. All right, whatever. But then during shofar, like I saw him and he's just learning Bava Kama, you know? And like, I was like, really? Like, I understand learning is a great thing, but like, this is a mitzvah that comes by once a year, and the mitzvah is directed at getting us to wake up and do tshuva, you know? And like, you're just learning Bava Kama, like something is off there. Like, you know, if you're not listening to the shofar and you're not being woken up and you're not like, doing tshuva, like there's some disconnect between like your involvement in Torah as an intellectual pursuit and your involvement in Torah as like something that shapes the way that you live. You know, that might be a thing that people are prone to who Pirkei Avos is addressed to, like these high level intellectuals, you know, and I'm sure if I asked this guy, hey guy, do you value tshuva? He'd say yes, you know. But what the Mishnah is telling him is don't fake yourself out into thinking that you can maintain a life where you're going to be implementing your Chochmah in action unless you are actively prioritizing your chet. So I think that answers the question, perhaps. Okay, let's read on because there's another potential answer to the question that we get from the second part of Rביnu Yona. Okay, and he's actually going to answer Lauren's question as well. I think one of her earlier questions. Okay, so he says now, anyone whose actions are greater than his Chochmah, who exceed his Chochmah will endure. Oh, by the way, I don't understand this at all. Okay, so this I tried to prepare this with several chavruses, didn't understand it, but we'll read it anyway. He says, if your actions exceed your Chochmah, so then consequently your desire for Chochmah will be greater than your Chochmah. So then every day you'll increase your Chochmah. But anyone whose Chochmah exceeds his actions, his Chochmah will not endure. Why? The opposite. So then his desire for Chochmah will be less than his Chochmah. And then his Chochmah will continue to dwindle. That's what the Rishonim explained. Okay, so I get the image he's saying. He's saying that if your actions are greater than your Chochmah, whatever that means, there's going to be this gap between your desire for Chochmah and the amount of Chochmah you have. And since you'll always have less Chochmah than your desire, you'll always be wanting to get more, and then that'll lead to this increase. But if your Chochmah is greater than your actions, then somehow that's going to result in your desire for Chochmah being less than your actual Chochmah, and then you won't want to learn, and then your Chochmah will dwindle. So like structurally, I understand what he's saying, but I don't really get what he's saying. You know, anyone have any idea? Or give an example, maybe? Yeah, Tamar?
Okay, I'm not confident that this is actually accurate, but the one thing I could think of is maybe somehow you'll like burn out.
Interesting. Okay. Can you talk that out, like paint me a picture here?
Okay, I'll try. Yeah. Okay, so I could imagine a person sitting and learning.
Yeah.
And maybe they like the learning, but because they're not seeing it implemented in their life that much, their ability to get really involved in it kind of like fizzles, or they get tired or something like that.
Okay. So I think I'm thinking along similar lines, although I think that you use the term burnout. I think fizzle out makes much more sense than burning out. Maybe just the way I use the terms, but like, let's say you have a person who is, let me think of an example here. Okay, like, hold on just a second. I'm just doing an example. Okay, if you've ever had an example of of trying to learn a practical skill. Like let's say trying to learn a musical instrument or like trying to learn how to bake or something like that, So then it is interesting because what happens is you're doing these actions and then the actions you're doing reveal all the gaps in your chochmah. And that drives you to learn even more, and you can't convince yourself that you really know what you're doing because you're constantly confronted with the limitations of your knowledge when you try to do something that doesn't turn out the way that you want. But if you're learning an area that like you're not actually practicing, it's very easy to convince yourself that you already know everything, and then you don't continue learning. So I think maybe that's what it's talking about here, is that if you are involved in all the actions, again, we're in Rבינו Yona land here, so we're talking about like mitzvah actions, not like just mitos. If you're involving yourself in all these mitzvos, the mitzvah will draw you in to realize that you need more chochmah, like just as an example of this, like I, this week, went to 2 shiva houses, and it's been a while. Well, it's been like 6 months since I have learned the halachas of avelus. And like, I went into the shiva house and like, I'm there with my student. And like, we start talking and then we realize that, we can't talk words of Torah. And then we start talking about how, well, is this one of the mutter subjects or not? And then if it is mutter, are we allowed to go in depth? And like, if the issue is because of simcha, then are we allowed to have happiness? And then we get drawn to this whole sugya. And then like today, that led me to give a whole shiur on like the issur of Talmud Torah for the mourner, And so the action, if I hadn't like done the action, I wouldn't have gotten involved. I wouldn't have realized what I didn't know, and I wouldn't have gotten involved in this learning. So I think the more mitzvah actions you involve yourself in, then the more you're going to be driven to learn the chochmah to bridge that gap. But if you just are involved in the chochmah, you can like read over Hilchos Avelos and be like, okay, I got this, and then you're not in any practical situation that like shows the gaps in your knowledge, and then you just walk around thinking and then you stop learning it, All right, I think that's what he means. I'm happy with that. Okay, then he goes on and says like this, aval ich afshar. So he raises a question. He says, aval ich afshar, which is I think what Lauren said. Ich afshar lios masav meruv min chochmah. How could you, or maybe El, how can you have your actions exceed your chochmah? If you don't know Torah and mitzvos, then can you really do these actions? On what basis are you going to do them? Okay, so he's asking a question basically like you need some knowledge in order to do the mitzvos. So like, how does that work? So now he gives a different interpretation. Ella shizosa mishnah dibra lefi eitza tova na'ay umukubel sheyesh lemi yodea. Is that a right thing? Hold on. See, I always use my phone to scan it, and sometimes I try to proofread it, but sometimes there's like a little error in the scanning. And here I feel like there's an error. Sorry about that. Rבינו Yona's here. Nope. Sorry, delay. Rבינו Yona, I gotta find him. Okay, here we go. למי שאינו יודע. Oh wow, yeah. Big difference. She'eino yodea. It's funny. Just yesterday, I was teaching Rבינו Yona on Mishlei 2:2. Oh, sorry, not 2:2. 2. I don't remember where it was. Yeah, 2:2, I think, where he says that the first step in acquiring Chochmah is that you listen carefully. And he says there's certain people who don't listen carefully, and they say they think that they heard the word yes when they heard no, and they think they heard mutter when really it was usser. And he said like that person's never going to learn. So I gotta make sure that my Google Lens learns that lesson when it's taking these pictures. So he says this is good advice for someone who doesn't have knowledge. Laval yova nafsho, to not destroy or harm his soul. Okay, how? This person, so let's say this is talking to a person who does not have knowledge, okay, which I guess goes against our thesis that this is only for high level people. It's saying that this person who doesn't have knowledge should accept upon himself to do everything the chachamim tell him. And he shouldn't deviate to the right or to the left. kasher yeda'im. As they tell him, he should act according to everything they tell him. Umiyad, and here's the revolutionary idea. Umiyad once the person accepts upon himself to do this, to do all the things that the Chachamim tell him, then God considers it as though he has reward for doing all the mitzvos. And that's what they mean when they say anyone whose actions exceed his chochmah. Because this is a radical idea. Even that which he doesn't know and doesn't do, nikraim ma'asav. They're called his actions. Because he has reward for doing them as if he did them based on what he's received. So there's another version of this Mishnah in Avos, the Rabbi Nasan, that brings us a support text. We will do, then we will understand. That the Jews, Israel, preceded doing before understanding. Or they should have said nishma v'nase. We will understand, then we will do. Before you are able to do the actions, you need to know. You need to listen to understand what you're doing. Ella, rather, they accepted upon themselves to do everything that they were commanded, and then they would understand. Then they received reward as though they did them. So let me pause here, summarize, and then read the next clause and summarize, and then I'll call on Shira. So he's really bothered by this notion of, if we really want to take this Mishnah literally, that your actions, it's fine, because it's almost like he's using the word precedes, but like he's saying you need some knowledge in order to do to be able to fulfill the mitzvos. But then he says, no, there's a method you can use where you just do whatever the Chachamim tell you and you rely on tradition. And when you do that, that's considered your actions and you get rewarded for them, even though you haven't done them and don't understand them. So in other words, just the act. So what he's saying, Kol Shemasav Merubim Chochmaso, is just referring to a person who commits to following the entire Torah before he understands anything. That person, his Chochmah will persist. But Kol Shemasav Merubim Mimasav, etc., that will not last. So what does that mean? Shelo Yomar, a person should not say, Eshne halacha zov akaimenu. I will learn this halacha and only then will I fulfill it. Eshne kol Talmud v'akaimena. I'm going to learn the entire Talmud and then I'll fulfill it. V'im ko yomar, and if you say that, lo tiskayim chachmaso, then your chachma will not last. Kitzarach tikun midos techila. You first need to have perfected midos. Ve'achkach chachmaso miskayemes. So he's learning the second Mishnah to be about two things. Okay, let's just go back to second point here. He says, what does it mean that your actions exceed your wisdom? That's saying that if you don't know anything, you should just accept upon yourself to do whatever the experts say, and then God will reward you as though you've already done them, and then your chachma will last. But if you say, well, I'm only going to keep the halachos that I understand, or I'm only going to master the subject and then start keeping the halachos, then your chachma will not last. Okay, that's a radical way to learn this. Okay, Shira.
I think that just like brings up a concern for me with like how to know like authorities to trust and turn to.
Right. Yeah. So that is a thorny practical issue here. So for all intents and purposes, for in order to sidestep that issue, like how to choose a posek, or how to know which halacha svarim to rely on. I think that we can definitely say that there are, like certain universal authorities in the Jewish people. Like the vast majority of Jews follow the Shulchan Aruch, and the Ramah, and like if you have a posek, then you apply this to your posek. Okay, how you get a posek, or like what do you do when like other posek would go against the Shulchan Aruch? That is like a legitimate question that I don't think we have time to take up tonight.
I guess
but,
it's
like,
more of an issue nowadays, like when there's so much like access to everything.
I think so. I think that is a problem of nowadays. And for those who haven't read Chaim Soloveitchik's essay, what's the famous essay? This is the Rav's son. That
Rupture and reconstruction.
Yeah, rupture and reconstruction, right? Rupture and reconstruction, which I think that they either did just republish with like a new edition with footnotes. Yeah, I think they did. He talks about like the evolution or the changes in halacha, that halacha used to be learned mimetically, where like you would absorb halacha based on like what you saw being practiced around you, and then like the theoretical would be its own pursuit, but you would be keeping halacha. You wouldn't be in this position that we're in now, where like what do I do, and I have to like look it up. So yeah,
so that in itself is more like a middos learning style.
Yeah, correct. That's a good point, right? It's much more through informal education, through watching and doing, rather than like opening the books. Yeah. Good question, Shira. A lot of this, this is the problem with what do you call it? I feel like this is, I'm gonna side commentary here. Mishlei is also practical, but in Mishlei with decision making, I feel like I think because the cases are more drawn from everyday life, we can like talk about the practical dimension in a much more contained way. In Pirkei Avos, when you're talking about mitzvos, there's so many other things connected to the mitzvah system that like it becomes hard. Like we have a desire to like translate this into full practical terms, which is a healthy desire, but it's like a daunting task, Yeah. Tamar.
So I had a very similar question. So I think it's a lot of it's been addressed, but I guess I'm asking, I guess it seems to me like you don't have to say this person has like no knowledge, and they just like blindly followed the chachamim because they just like randomly picked, right? Like you could say they're not learned in Torah and mitzvos, like they're not like a lamdan,
Right.
But maybe they could see what they could intellectually see that it makes sense to follow the chachamim, or that the Torah is a good thing or something like that, and start from there.
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't mean that they are an ignoramus or a dullard, right? It just means that they don't have an understanding of the halachos that they are being expected to follow. Yeah. Okay. So what do we get from here? Oh, so this is an interesting mentality. The one that the guy who says, I'm only going to understand the stuff I'm only going to follow the stuff that I understand, right? So it seems like, just to diagnose the problem, it seems like that person, on the one hand, like it's an admirable trait, like we hold that you should understand things, but it seems like this person is trying to set up his own intellect as the be all and end all authority. Like he's okay doing mitzvos, but he's only going to do them if it makes sense to his own mind, So why is that going to result in his chochmah not persisting? And on the first clause, the first part, what does it mean that you get reward for doing all the mitzvos just by accepting them? That sounds like a radical statement. And why would that make your chochmah persist? Yeah, Ayala?
So I don't have an answer to the second question, but to the first question, it's reminding me of like I feel like in some cases you do need to rely on authority in order to move forward in your knowledge. Like you're not going to be able to go through every single step in order to get, like you have to rely on authority and then you go through it logically, but even in terms of developing knowledge.
Yeah. So you're correct. In any area of knowledge, then you have to rely on authorities in order to make progress. And I always remember like when I was in Rav Pesach's Gemara shiur, and there were certain guys in the shiur that year who like thought that they knew how to learn better than Rav Pesach. And like they would like question every single thing that he did, not in a like asking in order to understand, but in a like challenging, like, why are you doing it that way? And I believe he said like, if you're learning geometry and like your teacher like draws a line and you say like, I refuse to proceed unless you can prove to me that lines exist, like you're not going to learn geometry. Like you need to, like, maybe if you're Euclid and you're trying to like go from the premises and stuff, but like you need to accept certain premises, on a conditional basis. You're not saying that I'm holding this true. You need to, have a working hypothesis in order to like be able to move forward in the thing. But this person, so I understand that in the intellectual realm. The question though is, how is this person is refusing to do the mitzvah until he understands it. So how is that going to interfere with his chochmah? Are you saying that that's like it partakes of the same thing, or just reminded you of that? Yeah, Tamar?
I'm not sure.
Or yeah, sure. Tamar?
I'm not sure if this is what Rבינו Yona is saying, but I think one thing that can happen is like, it's kind of, maybe this is blending it with the other idea, but like, if he doesn't like a mitzvah,
Yeah.
it's going to be really easy for him to just not understand it and then not do it.
Right. Yeah. That does blend in with the other idea really nicely. Right. Yeah, that's definitely a true thing. Yeah, you're right. I also don't know if that's what the Rbinim Yona is saying, but that's definitely true. Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah, it's like when when hold on a second. Just I just gotta remember the line. So in the Shiva house, when I was talking with my student Yehoshua, and he was really starved for learning. Like he really wanted to like learn, because it was you don't realize how much you miss learning until it's usher for you to learn, for like 7 days, so I was trying to like research and like ask for Pesach about, are we allowed to learn in depth in the areas that mourners are allowed to learn in, so I finally got a response from Pesach about the Aruch HaShulchan, and I said to Yehoshua, like, do you want to hear what the Aruch HaShulchan says? And Yehoshua jokingly said, like, depends on what he says, like if he's going to say that I can't learn in depth, I don't want to hear it, it's, I think we all feel like that about halacha, like certain things you just don't want to ask, so yeah, if you have certain emotional, you're going to be able to justify whether or not you learn something based on whether you like to do the action or not. Yeah. Shira?
Well, I feel like on what Ayala was saying, like we believe that there's inherent value to like following the mitzvah lifestyle. So he wouldn't be having that.
Yeah. So that's definitely clear, is the person who only does mitzvahs that he understands is going to miss out on the benefit of the mitzvahs. The question is, what is this consequence of his chochmah will not endure?
Can you say that again?
Yeah. The Mishnah says anyone whose chochmah exceeds his actions, his chochmah will not endure. So you're pointing out the consequence that he will lose out on all the benefits of keeping halacha, right? That's definitely true. And he'll get all the consequences of doing averos.
Right.
But the Mishnah is focusing his chochmah will not endure. And I want to understand what that means.
Mm.
Yeah. And again, that's the interesting thing we noted when we were asking the questions here. There's lots of consequences of not having your schit and lots of benefits of having your schit. This Mishnah puts everything in terms of, is your chochmah going to endure or not? That's what makes this tantalizing. Yeah, Yael?
I also don't know if this is what he's actually saying, but maybe there's certain kinds of chochmah that you would only get from actually experiencing whatever there is that you're doing, and you can't just intellectualize it.
Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, so I'm going to definitely what you're saying is true, that there's chochmah that you can only get from experience. Okay, and for me, the time that this really like stood out the most was not really about mitzvos. It was I did my graduate school, my master's degree in Jewish education, and so for half of the time I was in graduate school, it was before I started teaching, and then I started teaching, and then had other classes. It was night and day. Like I'm sitting here in classes before I was even teaching, and I'm hearing all the stuff about lesson plans and classroom management, blah blah, and like I'm understanding it. Then once I'm in the classroom, somehow the experience just caused the knowledge to light up in a different way, and like the mind relates to it in a different way when it's practical. Okay, I'm gonna make one adjustment though, which is apparently you don't even need to be involved in it. Being involved in it is one thing, but the Rbinim Yona puts the emphasis on the acceptance upon yourself to do it, right? Like it's the once Klal Yisrael said Naaseh v'nishma, they got reward for doing all the mitzvos, even before they actually started doing it. So what I'm wondering is, maybe the whole thing is that you have to engage the subject matter as a reality, and the bare minimum of engaging it as reality is taking it upon yourself to do it, right? That is what pushes
that's always the hardest part of doing
yes, right. Yeah. That is definitely the hardest part, the commitment to doing it, and and that's what pushes you over the threshold from being involved in a strictly theoretical involvement into an involvement in a reality. And maybe that's what unlocks the phenomenon of the mind that Yael was talking about, of like, oh, now like my mind can work on this as a reality. Like I'll give you another example, which I have not had experience with, thank God. Like, you could study military strategy from books, okay? But if you get drafted for the war, okay, and you know you're gonna be a soldier that's gonna go into battle, I'm sure that just that knowledge changes the way that you relate to all strategies that you learn, like even before you actually enter into the war, like the fact that I'm going to have to do this, then that changes things. So I really like that approach. Yeah, shiur.
You just gave me another idea. Like
Sure.
the motivation, I think, also changes. Like
Right.
in your example, because it's your life on the line. Like it's
Yeah.
not just doing it well. It's like if you don't do it well, there are fatal consequences.
Right. The reason, so that is definitely a true idea. Also, the reason why I phrased it my way, or why I emphasize my quality, is because I'm trying to still tie it into the Chochmah miskayemes and Chochmah inim.
Keep doing that.
I know. Look. This is the great thing. I'm gonna say this point now. Okay, I've said this a lot in my Mishlei shiur, but I'm gonna say it now, partially to like make myself feel better about only having these half ideas. Okay, which is that, if you walk into learning Mishlei or Pirkei Avos with the only standard of value being like, our goal is to understand what the Mishnah is saying, okay, and to get the ideas of Rambam, Rבינו, Yona and stuff. So then if we only have half ideas, then you're going to only be half satisfied, okay? But the way I think that the healthier way to look at this is, these are, they're trying to teach us ideas, but these are also platforms for us to get to think about these topics and get lots of other ideas. And even if we don't end up understanding what Rבינו Yona is saying, we're getting lots of other ideas about Chochmah and yiras chet and action and the relationship with mitzvos, and that's a big gain. And I'm in here just for all the Torah I can get, like even if I don't understand like the particular ideas. So
I feel like we should also bring this up on the life skills chat and like rejuvenate that.
Yeah, we got to revive that, especially in light of this discussion, right? Like it has to be practically implemented. Yeah. Okay, in the interest of time, I was late. Okay, sorry for that. I want to go over one last quick idea from Sforno. This is radically different than like than all the other approaches I've seen, and it's quasi-political. Okay, I'm going to read this, and well, it's not quasi-political. He explicitly says it's about political philosophy. Okay, but as I read this, think about politics. Okay, think about all branches of politics. Think about the liberals and progressives, think about like the conservatives and Republicans, think about libertarians, because I think everyone is subject to this problem. Okay, here we go. Very short Sforno. He says, actually, it's so short, I'm gonna go ahead and type the translation. Okay, so he says like this. Oops. Okay. Hine b'omro yiras chet, when he says fear of sin, Amar al hahizar mehara labrios. This refers to refraining from harming people. Okay. The Chochmah and wisdom, Amar al ha-Chochmah Madinis, is said about political philosophy. Okay. Now, political philosophy is there's no real good translation for this. Political philosophy means like your philosophy of like ethics and interpersonal relationships, okay, or like how you should treat people, okay. So it's not political like in the sense of like politicians. Okay, maybe ethical philosophy would be better, about ethical philosophy, okay. V'hamasim, and actions, amar al mash yaseh adam lahetiv l'zlaso, refers to what you do to benefit someone else. Okay. So right away, he answers the three questions. Very clean. Nice. Thanks, Sforno. Okay. Amar in Cain. So he says, in Cain, k'sheyisnaheg ha'adam b'chachma medinis. If so, okay. When a person conducts himself in his ethical philosophy, okay, bitzdaka umishpat, with righteousness and justice. Okay, or if you want to use or to use Rabbi Sachs's translations, okay, which I'm trying to popularize, distributive and retributive justice. Okay, he defines righteousness as distributive justice, or like allocating resources, and mishpat as like enacting like punishment. Uvihizahar min hamas, and guarding against violence. Okay, v'zo mipnei yiras. Hold on, I might have another scanning problem. I'm just going to check the text. Yup. Okay. Sorry, I'm not going to translate this inside. I'm not going to write the translation. We're just going to read it from here. I must have missed a whole page. Okay. So he says like this. And so when he conducts himself with his ethical philosophy in righteousness and justice and guarding against violence, and this is because of his fear of sin, meaning this is because of his desire to refrain from harming people. This is because he recognizes the greatness of his creator, and that this is his will, and that all of this is proper to do for his glory. Then his chochmah, meaning his ethical philosophy, will endure. Because there will not be any reasoning that will oppose this, his political philosophy. However, but if his refraining from harming others is only a means to his political philosophy, namely that he refrains from harming people just so that he doesn't harm society, then his political philosophy will not last. Because sometimes the particular enjoyment or the particular utility will be greater in his eyes than the welfare of the society. Okay. Okay. And then what the person will do is they'll violate their political philosophy for the sake of that benefit. And as a sign of this, Amar, he says, that anyone whose actions exceed their chochmah. What does that mean? That he does good actions even when there is no benefit to the society at all. And he's only doing this in order to emulate his creator and to follow in his ways. He's just doing it for good midos. Once he recognizes his virtue, and this is a sign that his political philosophy is also for the same reason. And that therefore his political philosophy will endure. That there won't be any like logic or reasoning that will oppose it. However, when the opposite of this happens, then the opposite will happen. So just to summarize Sforno here, he's saying that you have three things. You have refraining from harming others, and then you have your political philosophy, and then you have doing good things. Okay, so if you have a political philosophy, and if you refrain from harming people, and like that is your baseline principle, and then that is the foundation of your political philosophy, then you'll never harm people, and your political philosophy will endure. Okay, but if you only prioritize your political philosophy, then you'll find ways to justify harming other people to where it benefits you. Okay, your political philosophy will not endure. And when I said before, think about politics, you can think of all these cases where, again, I don't care if you're talking about like progressives or like, Republicans or like, libertarians, you'll find examples where like they allegedly hold one thing politically, and then they use that to justify harming other people, in order to, and they'll do it under the name of their philosophy, but what Sforno's learning the mission to be saying is that at the baseline has to be that I'm not going to harm other people because I am emulating God and I care about all creatures. And then he's saying there's a positive measure also, which is that if you are upholding your political philosophy and doing good, even when it's not going to affect other people, so then then that's going to be a sign that your political philosophy will endure. And I have a weird example of this, which is kindness to animals. Okay, right? Like we have in the Torah, in the mitzvos, shiluach. I always forget how to say it. Shiluach haken. I think it's ken, not kan. Shiluach haken, and kan sipor. Depends on where in the sentence it is. So, the Rambam and the Ramban explain that, the reason why we shoo away the mother bird when we take the eggs is because to not do so would be giving into cruelty, and we want to, have practice the trait of mercy, so that we develop it in terms of our relationship to other people, or returning a lost object, even when you're not going to get a reward for it, or all these other cases in halakha where you're doing these actions that don't have a direct ramification on another person, but you're keeping the system anyway to develop good midos, or like kashrus, and kedusha, of exercising restraint in the areas of the sexual and the appetitive, because kedusha is a value of emulating God. So then that will be a sign that your political philosophy will not be justified, will not be rationalized. Yeah, Ayala.
Okay, I'm not exactly sure I understand where the political philosophy, how it'll lead to that. Could I give a example, and you'll let me know if I'm on point? So I was thinking of a case of let's say someone's walking outside and there's a little piece of garbage on the floor, or some random little small thing that in the big scale won't really affect anyone, but it's just a small good act, whatever that they can do.
Yeah.
So is that the type of act that you're talking about?
Yeah, I would say that that's the type of act that he's talking about in the second part. Yeah.
And then how would that lead to?
Because what he's saying is that you're really leading with the values, not with the political philosophy. See, the term is clear in Hebrew. Chochmah ha-medinis. So Medina is from the same word as Medina, and the Chochmah here means the ethic, societal ethics. So you're doing this. You're doing this action based on the value of the halakha bidracha, of emulating God, independently, irrespective of whether it's actively benefiting another person. So yeah, Lauren, you have an example, or you want to help me out?
Well, I don't know. I'm wondering, I'm thinking politics, trying to think of contradictions. So one thing I'm thinking about, if you value certain key principles, let's say all men are created equal, then you're not going to ever, and then you strive to treat everybody nicely, then you're not gonna ever justify racial differences. Right. But I guess I'm thinking about right now, there's this movement to lower white people because blacks have been low for so long, therefore we should make whites feel inferior. But that's kind of going against their goal, because they're not going to achieve equality that way. That only makes the whites angrier, and then they're going to get lowered again. So it's kind of they're not going to endure. But if you stick to if you stick to just being nice or trying to treat everybody equally, then you won't then you will endure and you will have a lasting society. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. That's a good example. I was thinking of another example, which again, this needs more thought, and I also have to stop soon. Again, I'm getting to my bedtime. But I was thinking of with the pro-life and pro-abortion. I think they both run into the same mistake, right? Because the anti-abortion people, pro-life, are allegedly pro-life, right? But then they make these laws that end up putting mothers and even their kids at tremendous risk, and it ends up in ending lives, and then the pro-abortion people, when you take that to the extreme, it ends up leading to a disregard for the sanctity of life, which is, which when you take it to the real extreme, then you get Nazi Germany, where like you're rounding up disabled people and killing them, so it's like all of these philosophies are justified in the name of the Medina, like in the name of like, this is bad for society, this is good for society, and let's say in contrast, and I'm not pretending that halacha, the Jews don't struggle with this also, but like, we hold by this simple principle of, of v'chai b'hem, and that human life is sacred, and like, and that's an absolute value. And like, yeah, we don't kill a fetus, but if it's a danger to the mother, then or whatever the circumstances are, then we have an abortion. And like, but we also don't, like, in other words, it's based on this principle of respecting the Tzelem Elokim as a reflection of like kavod Hashem, not in terms of the utilitarian benefit on the society. Now, again, what makes it difficult is that I think both the conservatives and the liberals also justify their things in terms of absolute values, not in terms of the society. So it gets really messy, but something to think about. The reason why I wanted to show you Sforno is not because I fully understand it, but because can you just feel how different it is than the Rambam and Rבינו Yona? Like, it's just a completely different take on it. And it equally belongs in Pirkei Avos because it's about like the philosophy of ethics, but it's not about like your personal conduct and how you like set up your curriculum. Okay. Ordinarily, I end this by like doing like a review and like we read all the questions and then go through all the answers for all of them. Frankly, I just don't have the energy right now. So we have this one that has a lot of loose ends. I think that I can speak for myself. I hope I speak for you too. I think that we touched on a lot of interesting ideas and practical questions that we need to give more thought to. And it's possible that we'll revisit it next week, not as the main topic, but there are some Mefarshim who learned the next Mishnah in line with this Mishnah. So maybe we'll revisit it, or if not, we can just talk about it on the chat, the shiur chat. And if you have any other ideas throughout the week, then we'll continue the discussion. I just done for tonight. Okay. So thanks for coming. This is a interesting thing. Again, I apologize for not having as polished ideas as usual, but hopefully we got good discussions out of it.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be back.
Have a good night.
Nice
Thank you so much.
Yep. All right. Have a good night.